Since well before Canada was a country, our neighbor to the south has grown and prospered, over time becoming a veritable superpower, the torchbearer for Western democratic values. The United States is also our primary economic partner. We share similar values and security concerns, and it is for these reasons and more that journalist and author Diane Francis says a merger of our two countries makes sense. It's all outlined in her new book, Merger of the Century: Why Canada and America Should Become One Country. And here's Diane Francis now. Nice to have you back here.
Great to be here.
You never write about controversial stuff. It's always so easy for you. All right, let me do one quote from the book, which will really get us into we'll get the fur flying here. Here you go. My advice to Canadians is that loathe America or love it, a merger is the best and only comprehensive solution we have, notwithstanding the political challenges it would present. This transaction would be the most audacious and important in the history of either nation. On the other hand, it would be less difficult than the amalgamations the Germans and Europeans have achieved, or what the plucky South Koreans envision, and the rewards would be far greater. Okay, let's go through this. Why do you think this makes sense now?
Well, I think it's probably made sense for a long time, and it will for a long time to come. I wrote this book because I really believe that both countries have to pose to themselves the existential questions that need to be answered going forward. Canada is a relatively small economy and a relatively small population with the second biggest piece of real estate. We can't develop it, we've neglected it, and we can't even defend it. We have a Navy with 8,500 people. So what do? The Russians have declared the Arctic is theirs. The Chinese are starting to target and make inroads in our resource industry. Our border with the Americans after 26 years of free trade is worse than it was before.
Worse in what respect?
Thicker. We have all kinds of impediments to trade. I know manufacturers in Canada that are having to build branch plants in the US because of the delays in the red tape and the cost of doing business. And this is supposed to be a free trade zone. So we've never gone those next steps toward eliminating the border like the Europeans have. And then the United States. I mean, the United States is going to need resources going forward. It's going to need opportunities going forward. And bearing down on both of us is state capitalism. And this is a new model, economic model, embodied in the Russians, the Arabs, and the Chinese, which is better than free enterprise in many ways because the government's harnessed to be on their side. And so they're able to grab living standards, resources, and they're going to be a huge competition. Not a conspiracy. I'm not, Reds should die and all that sort of thing. It's not like the Cold War, but it is actually a new era we're entering. And it's very, very important that we understand what we have to deal with.
Have you had people come up to you saying, you know what, you do lay out a case, as you just have, in, say, 250 or 300 pages of what the problems are facing the two countries, but your solution is the wrong solution. There's got to be a different solution.
Well, there's 5 solutions in this book, 5 economic models and 2 political models. 3, actually. But the 5 economic models would range from doing what the Germans did and just go for it, which is a real long shot, a full-on merger. And I talk about how that would be, and that's when it becomes a thought experiment. Okay, what would that look like? Canada would get 13 states, we'd get the vice presidency, we'd own all the bonds, they'd have to pay us a lot of money, all of those things. We can do a joint venture in the North, give them right of first refusal on all the leases, so they can help us develop the North in a sustainable, smart way. Or we can do a European Union, where everybody stays intact, we create a 4th level of government, call it a commission, the binational commission, and we start to realize the synergies that I outlined in the 4th chapter of the book. Things like hydroelectric power. We have clean energy we cannot develop because there's a border. And because there's a border, there's political risk, and because there's political risk, there's no financing. So we have these enormous assets that continentally we could do. Mexico is not part of this, by the way. No way. Mexico is not ready, maybe never, to join a partnership of any kind.
This is just a CANUSA effort.
CANUSA, Can America.
That's, I don't know if you ever say it in the book, but do you have a name for this new country if it were to happen?
Well, some of the American commentators, one has called it Can America. Foreign Policy magazine called it Can America.
Can America.
Which sounds like a question. And then American, then AmCan. Then there's the United States of North America. There's all kinds of things you can do. North American Union.
A lot of this is timing, and I suspect a lot of Canadians are looking at what's happening south of the border these days, at the complete insanity and dysfunction of their form of government, and are legitimately asking, why would we want to hitch our wagon to any of that?
Well, and if that's what Canadians believe, then they never will. And that's fine, but there are consequences to never will. I think that you have to look at it from a different point of view. First of all, I was born and raised as an American. That's a noisy place. They make noise, they're dramatic. Everything's a big deadline. Their media harnesses up. They love the deadline. You and I knew, watching this latest shutdown, are they going to go over the edge, over the edge? Well, of course they wouldn't. They never have. They've done this 37 times. They never go over the edge, but you need a deadline. You need the pressure to get some movement on it. And so, I don't see it as dysfunctional as a lot of people on Fox would see it as dysfunctional and that sort of thing. Yes, you have these very extreme Republican people, these Tea Party people, who are ruthless and holding their own party to hostage, but that's their own party's fault. In Canada, I would argue, we have a lot of dysfunction too. We have a country where we can't get pipelines approved. We have British Columbia preventing Alberta from selling its oil by building a pipeline, probably always will unless something really major happens. We have Quebec suing Newfoundland to try and block them from power exports to the United States. What is going on here? We have no Interstate Commerce Commission. We have no way to facilitate people getting along. We have a very weak federal government. Our provinces are too powerful. And the government's played too big a role in terms of decision making. So I would say both of us are kind of broken and need a little fixing. Can we fix it together? Probably not. So you do a European Union or you do a joint venture.
Well, let's play forward one of the scenarios that you put forth in the book, which is, and I think you costed it out at something like $17 trillion.
Yeah.
So if the United States wanted to, in essence, merge with Canada, and I guess it's really them subsuming us rather than the other way around, which we'll talk about in a second.
Not really.
If we merge with them and they buy us for $17 trillion, play it out. How does that work out for the average everyday Canadian?
Well, what I did was I thought, well, let's have some fun with this. And I compared it to the German experience. East and West Germany in 1990 merged in 11 months. There was a crisis in East Germany, but it cost the West German economy in entitlements and rebuilding East Germany, because it was a mess. It cost them much more than the size of their entire economy. That's roughly the same. That's actually the Germans spent more proportionally in merging those two than this would happen. Now, what you have is a very big country like the United States, and you have a small country population-wise. We have more untapped resources. That's where the payment would have to come in. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, they have to pay us $17 trillion. This is just one measure. I took 8-9 metrics. I worked with an investment banker. We looked at water. We looked at arable farmland. We looked at oil and gas reserves. We looked at metals and minerals. We looked at all the different things how you measure the value. It's a hypothetical figure, but it could be $7 trillion. It could be $17 trillion, but it's totally affordable. And I worked out how they would give us bonds. Canadians would get bonds based on years of residency.
We get $500,000 each, right? Something like that.
You divide it according to how many years you lived in Canada and paid taxes in Canada or, resided in Canada. And so you get paid out, and then Canadians become the #1 creditors in the world to the United States, this new merged entity, the United States of North America, or Can-America. And therefore, we have control. We want control of the Federal Reserve. We want control of the Treasury. The banking we would run, of course, much better than they do, and all these other things. So you actually could look at it as a reverse takeover in a way. Now, what do Canadians get out of it besides a payment? It may not be in the form of money that you would get it. It could be tax breaks. It could be free medical care for life anywhere in the two countries. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do this. And this is actually doable. It was fun to work on it because what I did was I just applied an investment banking model. And I pretended the two countries were companies.
Okay, but I see that in the book. But I'm not sure what you've done is really figured out the emotional piece of this whole puzzle.
Well, that's in the book on politics. And I explain how impossible all this is going to be.
I know, but the thing is, you've made a business case for the essential merging of these two companies, if you can put it that way. But there's something intangibly, emotionally special about being Canadian, which I'm not sure the book really addresses head on. What do you say?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the politics is always the problem. And it's always the problem in corporations. Most mergers fall apart because of cultural clashes, they call it. Mm-hmm. And that really is about the vested interests in the two companies. Who's going to get the corner office? Who's going to be the CEO? Who's going to pick the board of directors? Who's going to be the boss? Who's going to be the VP of marketing? This is where they fall apart. It's no different in when you're joining two countries. Now, what I think is really a great model is the European model. They've finessed this. They've elegantly finessed this. Imagine 27 tribes, if you can call them that, who have been massacring each other for centuries, have no boundaries between them. Different health systems, legal systems, education, welfare systems, languages, and that is a miracle. And add to the fact that the original members of the European Union, who are very stable and in pretty good shape, they brought in, and they brought in all the dictatorships in Southern Europe and taught them how to be democratic and to be capitalist. They brought in Central European countries. So they've played midwife to a continent that's been a mess forever. And they've done it with a very nonviolent, elegant way. Is it bruising? Is it upsetting to people? Yeah. But there's two of us. My goodness, we like each other. We marry, like I say, we've heavily dated for a long time. I think we should think about common law.
Well, before we think about common law, we have to think about how we're going to take care of our health care. And I'm not sure I can think of too many Canadians who would say, yeah, I like their system better. How would you merge these two countries and yet respect the different values that we seem to have about how to insure people on health care?
Can have different health care systems side by each in the same country. I mean, in the United States, if you look at it, that we have for instance, our criminal code is a federally applied thing. So the criminal law is the same in every province in the country. In the United States, it's at the state level. So punishments are different. Some have capital punishment. Most of them are getting rid of it. Euthanasia in 3 states and in parts of other states. 3 states have voted for legalizing marijuana, and another 12 have it virtually legalized because they call it medical marijuana. Anybody can get the license to get it. So they're a patchwork quilt. There's no reason why this can't all work. I mean, you just do your own thing.
How about restructuring the economy? How would we have to do that?
Not much. Not much. We have
So
had free
integrated
trade.
already?
We have had free trade. Well, if you look at the Canadian situation, 80% of the stocks, the major stocks, Canadian stocks, trade in New York now. 80%. They don't trade in Toronto. 50% of our oil industry, American companies. Probably 1/3 of our mining output goes to the U.S. between those companies. Most of our foreign direct investment efforts by Canadians has been into the United States. The amount of investment by Canadians this is permanent investment, into not buying a condo in Florida, that's something else, into the United States is almost approaching in absolute dollars the amount the Americans have invested in Canada. Considering we're 1/10 the size, that's unbelievable. We have our banks are protected and a lot of other things. Retail, 60% of the dollars spent in retail, non-grocery, are spent in American chains. So, you have this wonderful integration that's going on, and 3 million Canadians live full or part-time in the United States. That's almost 10%. And here, there's 1 million people like me that have dual citizenship or American citizenship. We all have kids that are entitled to it. There's probably 3 million here. So, it's merging. And the other thing too, Steve, it's really hard to generalize about what a Canadian is and what an American is. I would say, and this is your sweet spot, I would say that especially Toronto baseball fans have as much in common with Boston baseball fans as they do with people in Vancouver or Montreal. So we have a lot of similarity and closeness. And I think there are some real obstacles, and I think it's all politicians.
Well, I don't know if this is at the top of the list, but it's certainly near the top of the list. Quebec. How would you resolve Quebec?
Oh yeah, okay. Well, how we do Quebec is, if you did a full-on German merger, in my thought experiment, you did the full-on German merger, Quebec is a problem. So you make it a commonwealth like Puerto Rico. It doesn't take statehood. You have 12 Canadian states join this big thing, and you have a commonwealth called Quebec.
So it's
still official language. They have their own
society.
prezi. Well, I think it is a distinct society. Yeah. And so that's the kind of issue that you can resolve through negotiation. If you can't, it doesn't happen.
Does Quebec's unique culture, language, et cetera, is all of that better protected under your new super scenario as opposed to the way it is today?
I think Quebec protects itself very well.
Regardless.
400 years they've done it.
Do you remember the first time Barack Obama ran for president and they did a public opinion poll up here about what percentage of the population would have voted for him had they had the vote? Remember what it was?
It was shocking.
It's like 75% or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so why would again, playing forward this scenario, why would Republicans in the United States like the idea of 13 new states joining the United States of North America who would almost overwhelmingly vote for the Democratic Party?
35 million Democrats, here we come.
It wouldn't
That
be
would happen.
Wouldn't be 35 million Democrats, but it might be 30 million Democrats.
Pretty close, because, you know, I'm a conservative, small c here. I'm left of the Democrats in the U.S. in that context.
Right.
Basically, I think what you're looking at is you never have a logjam again. No, from the Republican point of view, and I kind of deal with it in a cheekily way, in the book. But basically, if I'm a Republican, and these are the talking points that I'm using on all the media I'm doing in the U.S. Millions of jobs, national security, guaranteed, right? And energy independence, and resource independence.
So they like that part of it.
Bingo. And how about the Arctic, the strategic importance of the Arctic, which, you know, we can't guarantee. And so this is an enormous opportunity. We've got the Northern Territories, which I'm very familiar with, and I try and write a lot about it. People aren't interested in it. Most people have never been north of the 55th, and they never have any issue about it. And it just sits up there neglected. I mean, you know, one of the things that I think is really important to understand is that we do have a different system. We are more publicly owned. We were a colony, all of that, a small population. If Laurier had been elected in 1910, we'd have a second railway and probably have a population of 60 million people, because they would have done free trade then.
Right.
But look at Alaska. Alaska and the Northwest Territories discovered oil and gas 30 years ago, the same time. In 8 years, Alaska had a pipeline, 2 million barrels a day. Alaska has 25 seaports, rail, highway, 700,000 population. Everybody gets $1,200 a year royalty payment, man, woman, and child, okay? That's Alaska, and it's still pristine and beautiful, a wilderness, blah, blah. We have 3 Arctic territories, Nunavut, Northwest, and Yukon, 3 times bigger than Alaska. Population of Waco, Texas, less than 100,000.
Yep.
We have no seaports, no rail. One tiny road, the Dempster, which is really not a proper paved road. We have done nothing. The oil and gas has been stranded up there for 30 years. The permit to build the gas pipeline has never even been granted yet. And it'll never be built now because gas isn't worth anything.
But we have to merge with the United States in order to develop that area?
They'll roll up their sleeves and have it done. They'll do it. First of all, they can guarantee a market for it. Secondly, they have the capital. They have the manpower.
Does Canadians...
We don't have the capital.
Okay, but I don't know, maybe this is an old-fashioned view.
We need a partner.
Is Canadian sovereignty worth that little?
What is sovereignty?
Well, it's more than just having a navy exploring the cold waters of the Arctic and ensuring that you don't get invaded from the north. It's more than that, right?
Right.
I mean, there's something about Canadian sovereignty that we have right now that we presumably would not have if your scenario goes through.
We have more wiggle room to do the things we want. But I'm saying that we have some serious constitutional flaws. I mean, we took a constitution from the British that included a House of Lords, and look at that mess. The Senate's a joke.
Okay.
And it makes us not cohesive. We're not cohesive. And you can't have provinces, you know, blackballing one another's economic development, which is going on right now. And the Prime Minister can't do anything about it. He's a good guy, but he can't do anything about it.
But you're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't like the Senate, so you're going to sell the country?
I'm not selling the country. I'm talking about a merger, and it has to be something that Canadians want. And I want Canadians to think about their existential crisis looming. They have a north they cannot defend and cannot develop, and the world is not going to let us keep it a park. It's not going to be that way. So what are we going to do? And I'm saying, let's manage the future. Let's manage the process. Do we want a big Navy? No. Maybe we do a joint venture with Americans. That's a loss of sovereignty as far as I'm concerned, right there. Jack Granatstein says, as the opening quote in one of my chapters, I'm a Canadian nationalist, but if you can't defend yourself, you're not really sovereign.
Right. One thing we haven't talked about yet, which we do need to talk about, is guns. Yes, we have things in common with the United States, but guns is not one of them. we just have completely different values as it relates to
Absolutely.
guns and gun
Totally.
control. What would you do about that?
Well, they have a patchwork quilt again. I mean, I live part-time in Manhattan, and you can't own a gun in New York City unless you're a policeman and are licensed to. You cannot. That's a complete, forget Second Amendment rights. You can't own a gun in New York City. And there's huge parts of the United States that are doing gun controls like that. And more often, but you know, you hear the blah blah and the Fox and all that stuff. We do have a lot of guns, and we got rid of our registry. Remember?
The long gun registry.
The long gun registry. And yes, it's harder to buy guns here, and I think it should be harder to buy there. But again, it's a patchwork quilt. I can go into parts of Texas, which is a big gun culture. They all go to target practice to socialize, for goodness sakes. But you know, I can go into other parts of the United States where you need the 2-day, the 48-hour waiting period, cooling off period, whatever. And you need a reference and so on. I looked into all the research in it, and it's not. But do they have more violence and more gun violence? Absolutely, no question. So you don't live in those places where the violence is usually rampant.
Yeah, but if you look at Windsor, Detroit, I mean, that's just the best example anywhere of how that little river separating these two different countries seems to make a great deal of difference. You know, Windsor is a relatively peaceful place, and Detroit is not. And these are two different countries. And
Detroit is not, but the suburbs of Detroit are safe.
Suburbs of Detroit.
So what
are
I'm
different,
talking about is what you really have, just like we have in our reserves. The murder rate among Aboriginals in Canada is 7 times the average. In the United States, the African American murder rate is 6 times their national average. What you have is hideously disadvantaged minorities, and both countries. And that is what is playing out, and it's horrible to see. But, you know, I grew up in the U.S., and slavery did not really end in 1865. It ended in 1965 with the Civil Rights Act. And we all know that. It was apartheid, it was horrible. And so we're only talking a few years out. It doesn't make it easier, and it's tragic, and it's horrible. And, you know, there's a black person who's president of the United States now, which is a testament to how far they've come. But that sociological damage, psychological damage, familial damage is still acting itself out in our reserves, not to the same extent, obviously, as it is in the ghettos of the United States.
But I guess people, you know, again, if we're going to take your suggestion seriously, people would want to know, if we do merge with the United States, do we have to adopt their Second Amendment business?
I don't see why you have to.
You don't see
New
why
York
you
City
have
hasn't.
Okay. See what Jonathan Kay wrote in the National Post about your book? I'm going to share it with you and the viewers right now. Here's what he wrote end of September. Much of the merger of the century is written up like a business plan, with Ms. Francis demonstrating how the benefits of a union outweigh the costs. It's an analogy that feels clunkier and clunkier as the chapters march on. Corporations exist to make money, but nations exist principally to give expression to some guiding ethno-religious identity or creed. In Canada's case, much of its identity can be traced to an almost neurotic fear of being subsumed within the United States. The most militant manifestations of this anti-American spirit have been on the wane since Barack Obama came to office, but it still seems odd to think that even a sizable minority of Canadians could be convinced to give up our flag, our monarchist traditions, the legal supremacy of Parliament, and our seat at the United Nations in favor of a cash payout from Uncle Sam.
Well, then they won't, so it doesn't happen. Now, Jonathan didn't even read the book. So here's the point. There's 5 models. There's 2 political models. There's all kinds of different ways to skin this cat. I declare up front that, look, I'm a radical. I'm impulsive. I'm an American by birth. I'm a radical. I said, let's just do what the Germans did. Be amazing. Amazing. But, you know, that's not maybe the Canadian way. That's fine. But people should read the book before they comment on it.
How do you know he didn't read it?
Well, he didn't. He talked about one model.
Oh, he's talked about one model. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
but
this is a very, very serious nonfiction book.
No, I hear you.
Lots of policy ideas. But, you know, I think it's important, too, not to generalize, and people can't, you know, the narrative, the national narrative of the United States, the national narrative of Canada are narratives. They're not necessarily accurate. And, you know, I love both countries. I think they're both great countries. I don't think one is better than the other. I think some have better points than others. And so I think we should really get over that, especially since we are so interconnected. I mean, we travel together, we play together. Canadians are buying more real estate than any other foreigners for the last 4 years in the United States. And let me give you another stat.
Okay.
The 6 states in New England which are very like Canadians. Those people are very Canadian to me.
A lot of connection to the Maritimes, yep.
But they're like that in their attitude and their deportment. They kind of have that British sensibility. And then you take the 5 states in the Pacific Northwest. Then you take Minnesota and Wisconsin. Population of Canada, 34, 35 million people, right on the border. Vote Democratic. Their laws are more liberal in some cases than ours, and their crime rates the same or lower. So to say, oh, America's this and America's that, it's very stereotyped, and it's not fair. And there are whole parts of I think it's very regional. I have more in common with someone in New York or Boston than I do with someone in Dallas or Montreal.
Or Saskatchewan, yeah, maybe. But just a second ago, you say all of that. You know, it's the all of that we've sort of been fighting for 200 years to hang on to. The whatever it is that a lot of people can't articulate, but they feel it in their bones.
Sure.
That makes us different from them. And it's almost always been good politics in the history of this country to say negative things about Americans because we think we're morally superior to them.
British spread the word not to... Yeah, remember the Brits hung on to this piece of property without an occupying force. They did it through guile and cunning and propaganda.
Propaganda.
They're good. They're very good.
Okay, but it's not propaganda today. There's something different and special about being Canadian that has obviously
Canadians are different.
Yeah, that has obviously so far led people to believe that this is a bridge too far. This is a step we don't need to take. We have
And
enough.
it doesn't get taken.
But you want it to get taken.
I think it should. I didn't say I wanted it to. I say I think they should.
Well, you do want this to happen, don't you?
I want more integration. And I give 5 models,
Right.
5 economic models.
Which one do you like the best?
The most I'm in my radical side of my personality says, let's just do it. Let's
The whole
just
thing.
do it. Yeah, let's figure it out. Let's do it. To be more
Responsible?
cautious. No, not responsible. To be more cautious, I'd say a European Union should have been done a long time ago, and there's no reason why it hasn't.
Aren't we sort of there already?
Been able to do it. Oh, no, not at all.
Not.
There's a border. There's a border. Terrible border. Getting worse. They don't have borders. I can drive from Germany to France. It's just like unbelievable. And yet, everybody's systems are intact. They have elegantly finessed what I thought was impossible to do in 60 years. It took them 60 years, but it was doable, and it works out very well.
What about fiscal and monetary policy? Would we want to give up the levers that we have to have different priorities or do things differently from the United States?
Well, if you stay, it depends on what model. It depends on what model happens. If you want to get rid of, the Europeans have Eurozone, where everybody has the same currency.
Yep.
17 out of the 27 countries, 10 don't. They still don't have a border. So you can have different currencies, or you can have the same currency.
What would we do?
That's your monetary policy. If you have monetary union, then you have to share the monetary policy. And then, of course, obviously, if you did that, you'd have to have some kind of mechanism at the top, a 4th level of government that both sides would have to participate in running.
But I guess if we have monetary union, it's the American greenback that would end up carrying the day.
Oh, of course.
Of course.
It's the reserve currency of the world.
Would you miss seeing the picture of the Queen on all of your money?
No, I'm not a monarchist. I think it's embarrassing.
Let's try this. If Stephen Harper and Barack Obama both read your book and agreed that the Canada of today and the United States of today should merge, who picks up the phone first and makes the call?
Well, as I explained, and I'm getting the same sort of, stick that Donald MacDonald got in 1985. He also spent 3 or 4 years with a commission grinding away secretly and came up with a shocker of a recommendation. And he said, basically, Canada will not survive unless it does free trade with the United States, period. Won't survive. Oh, my God. Threw it under the bus. Every elected politician said, no, no, no. And the first elected politician to endorse it was Jacques Parizeau, who was the head of the Separatist Party. He says it's a jolly good idea. All in favor of it. And then a year after he did that, it was signed. It has to be a Canadian initiative. The Americans aren't going to do this. And I have documents from the State Department. They've always had an open door policy. Anytime the Canadians want to talk about free trade, we will, but we're not going to initiate it. Why are they not going to initiate it? Because they're big. It looks like an offer we can't refuse. It's not the right way to do it.
Well, and we'd be suspicious of any overture they made anyway.
Yeah, and the same thing happened in Europe. So it was the Benelux countries, the little bitty countries, who went to big Germany and said, hey, and France, and then Italy. And they started the whole process. It was the little guys who said, you know, we think we need this is in our best interest. So it has to start in Canada. Canada has to have the conversation. And that's what this book is about. This book is about starting a conversation with people that look at facts and don't, you know, pick on this and that. People that look at facts, who want to know and care about their country going forward, and both sides of the border, and say, hey, anything is up for grabs. Let's think about it. Let's think out of the box. Let's be creative. That's what I've tried to do with this. So, for instance, we're organizing a conference in both countries of academics, no politicians, none of that. Let's just talk about it in a sensible fashion and see if there's anything in it. And I'm telling you, the border is a problem now. 26 years after free trade, we have not tended that garden properly. And there's a lot of reasons, and that's in my second chapter.
Well, terrorism being the biggest, I guess, eh?
I think the drug smuggling from Canada.
Smuggling.
We're the biggest exporter of meth and ecstasy in the world. Now, how did that happen? It just how did that happen? It's on the RCMP website. So, you know, a lot of these things aren't, and then the Arctic is just ignored, and all kinds of things. And I see the battling politically between, I think it's disgraceful that Quebec can sue Newfoundland, and I think it's disgraceful that BC is allowed to prevent a pipeline of transporting a perfectly legal product to a market. Well, we can't have it. It's just not going to work.
Let me go back to that phone call, though. If it's up to Stephen Harper to call Barack Obama
He's
and
not
say,
gonna do it.
let's have a chat about this.
I've talked to the Prime Minister.
You have about this?
Oh, sure.
Really?
I know him quite well.
And?
I talked to him just before it came out, and I said, so heads up, just want you to know, and if anybody asks, of course, you're just finding out about it now. I said, I don't want anybody to think that you guys have anything to do with it. He said, well, you know, we can't support anything like this. And I said, that's right. But there are parts of this book, I guarantee you, that they're looking at right now, and they're saying, you know what, this is a jolly good idea. And yeah, why can't we integrate there? And they've got to do something about the border. We have got to do something about the border. We're going to choke.
But the premiers at least still get to be governors in your new canoe set. But the Prime Minister's out of luck. He doesn't have a job anymore. So why would any Prime Minister make that phone call knowing it's going to be the end of his career? Yes?
Well, you do a European Union, you do it gradually. I don't know. You know what? This is the problem. People have got to finally face up to the fact that Canadians have to realize the United States is the best ally they'll ever have, nice people, have the same values more or less, different style of behavior, and vice versa. Canada's a valuable ally, Canada's an important neighbor, and we both need each other big time. That's what I want to do. Just to have each other appreciate each other. The Americans are benevolently ignorant about Canada, and Canadians are malevolently knowledgeable about the United States. And I don't think that's fair. It's a great quote.
It's a great line in the book, yeah. But it's
Brebner? Is it Brebner?
The
historian.
Ian Bremmer. Was
no,
it Ian?
No. This is John Brebner, who was a British-American
I forget.
Canadian.
I forget.
Lovely
that is a good line.
quote.
We're sitting here talking, last question, in 2013. You think something needs to be done urgently on all of this. When do you think?
Not urgently. I think this is a 20-year. Something's going to be different in 20 years.
You think by the year 2033 we are going to be, as a political entity, different than we are today?
I think there'll be more integration, or we'll have problems. I think we can't let the border get worse than it is, or that'll shut down Canada. You know, and that the dollar is a problem. The Dutch disease is the phrase that I brought into the debate, and Mulcair's picked it up, and he's not wrong. We do have a Dutch disease. We're going to be a commodity-based economy. We can't have a currency that's relatively small, ruining tourism and manufacturing in one part of the country because commodity prices are higher than that. We have a productivity gap that is very serious. We're 17th in the world. The Americans are very productive. We've got a lot of things we've got to work through. And I just think that we should think about our partner. And they should think about their partner.
Merger of the century, why Canada and America should become one country. Diane Francis, nothing if not provocative, but there you go. Thanks for coming into TVO tonight.
Take care.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.